I've had two conversations this week with women who in a place where they're about to make big decisions. Things like changing their job, ending a relationship, the real big stuff, life-changing stuff. And both times I asked them the same question. And that was, before you make another decision, what stage of your boundary are you actually in? And why do I ask this? Because honestly, I don't think that most women make bad decisions. I think that they make their decisions too late in the piece. Because by the time you're calling something a bad decision, it's usually been brewing for a while. Right? I know you guys can relate to this. If you think back about something that you're at a choice point about, I would say there's probably been moments where something has felt slightly off. You might have noticed it, brushed it off, and then it's happened again. You rationalized it maybe, and then it kept happening, and you got more and more irritated, more frustrated. And then you get to this point where you're exhausted, you're tired, and you're saying, I need to make a decision. And by the time you get to that point and you're calling it a big decision, you've probably ignored the earlier three signals. And that's not a weakness. That's just a pattern. And that's something we can all change when we become aware of. So in my work, I teach that boundaries are signals, not walls. And that boundaries have four stages. So let's go through those four stages. Stage one is the triggers. And triggers are like that tiny moment where you go, something doesn't feel right, doesn't sit right with me. Now, we've all had those. Stage two is our soft boundaries. And this is where most people will still not say anything out loud. Like you're feeling more and more discomfort. You probably are running through the scenario in your head over and over again, overthinking it, overanalyzing it. You might even minimize it, tell yourself that you're overacting or that it's like a one-off situation. And you keep going. So it's like something that's happening to you internally, but usually most people it's not expressed. Stage three is the hard boundaries. And this is usually the first time that the issue becomes external. This is where people finally speak up, and honestly, a lot of the time it comes out as an explosion because it's been building up, right? You've been thinking about it, you've been rehearsing what you're going to say in your mind. You're there, and you're usually probably in a space where you're stressed and you've got all this tension around it. So it just comes out. And the last one, stage four, is the deal breakers. And deal breakers is also external because this is the point where you have made that decision that you're not doing it anymore, that you're walking away. This is where people go, I'm done. I'm not doing it. I'm not playing that game. This isn't sustainable for me. I'm out. Right? Gone. And hard boundaries feel powerful, but usually they're just what happens when that soft boundary was skipped. So it's like an escalation point, I suppose you could put it in that way. Because when you wait long enough before you say anything, your nervous system starts to build tension. Yeah. And we get frustrated, we get we navigate stories in our minds. How many of you go through this thing where you start thinking all these crazy thoughts, and they're probably not even true, but you start thinking things, and you're working off these narratives that probably don't even exist. And, you get more and more tense, more and more stressed, more and more in your mind, in your thoughts about it. And then one day, the dysregulation just kicks in and you can trick yourself into feeling this clarity. But you know what? It's not actually clarity. It's just that you're exhausted. And, you're at this point where everything feels dramatic. And that's when most people usually explode. And the thing is, too, it's not a matter of being more decisive. It's a matter of being more aware earlier on in the piece, right? Let's be earlier with how we notice things that are coming up for us. Let's be earlier on in the piece about how we name some of the things that are issues. Internally and externally, yeah, we speak those issues out loud. Because when something is addressed at either the trigger or the soft boundary stage, it's a lot lighter, it's cleaner, it's less loaded. Yeah, it sounds more like, you know, when this happens, it doesn't feel good for me, or I just reacted really badly when you said that. I just need to explore what that's about. Rather than reacting at that hard boundary and saying, I've had enough, I'm done, you did this to me, la la la. It can become really an emotional output burst as well. So I'm going to give you some little tips to help in this space, and have a think of these questions before you make another decision this week. So take a minute, take a breath, slow down, and ask yourself these questions. 1, when did it first start to feel off? That's usually the indication of the triggers. Yeah, something's not right, something's feeling off. When did that first come into play? And what was that? How did that show up in your body, in your thoughts? 2, ask yourself, what did I not say? Now, this might be, what did I not say to myself about what was actually going on? What did I not say to someone else about what was going on? Sometimes we have to get that clarity. Well, sometimes, all of the time, I would say we need to have that clarity in ourselves before we can communicate that externally to anyone else. The third thing is, what did you minimize? Did you get to this soft boundary stage and you talked it all away? You might have, said you were a little bit annoyed about it, but not direct, maybe a bit passive aggressive, like comments like, well, if you did that, if you loved me, you wouldn't do that, things like that. What did you minimize around your own thoughts and your feelings in that moment? And the last question is, did you not clearly name that was a need that's not being met? Yeah, so what need was not being met that you didn't clearly name? Now, once again, you might need to name this for yourself before you can communicate that with someone else. I would definitely recommend doing that, getting it clear in your mind what that need looks like before you start having that conversation. Because the thing is, when you ask yourself those questions, you realize that the moment you finally react is rarely the moment that the issue started. So this year, instead of making these bigger life-changing moves, how about thinking about making earlier moves instead? Because earlier moves create, like a calmer life, more connection rather than disconnection. And I invite you just to check in at what stage of your boundaries you're in before you make a decision. And if this landed, guys, tell me in the comments which stage that you usually operate in. And there's no judgments, as always, just that awareness, of how we all operate. So much love, and I'll see you next time. Bye.